Welcome into the Sports Hub Patriots podcast training camp edition, day 16, I think. Yes,
I don't even know what day it is.
of Patriots training camp. That other voice you hear is Evan Lazar. He joins us today for today's breakdown, and we'll look a little bit into Saturday's game as well with the Green Bay Packers. But Evan, good to see you again. It's our third podcast of the day. Just the way the schedule worked out. We'll keep this different for people who watched or listened to all three. We'll try to change things up a little bit. But good to see you again, bud.
Hey, oh yeah, a long time no see virtually at least. But yeah, we're out here in Green Bay. This is day 3 of 11 on this great road trip in this great state of Wisconsin. But I'm very much looking forward to Nashville, Alex. Just get me to Nashville. Get me to Broadway, in Nashville, not in New York, Broadway Street, and then we'll be good.
You almost sounded like a politician there for a second. The great state of Wisconsin. I love it here. All right, enough pleasantries. Let's get into the football. Right. Did the Patriots win the Super Bowl today? Because the way you guys were tweeting about it, the way it sounded like they were celebrating about it, what exactly did they win today?
Absolutely nothing. But I think what's cool about what happened today is that you saw a team go up against a Packers team that I know that there's some mixed feelings about the Packers because of their quarterback situation and how good they're actually going to be, but they have talented players up and down their roster. You know, we saw Jair Alexander out there today, Christian Watson on the offensive side of the football, and the Patriots were able to go toe-to-toe with them and win the day today. And after what it looked like yesterday, certainly offensively, I think defensively they competed yesterday and the Packers got some big plays on them, but it was more of a back and forth. Offensively yesterday was a mess. It was a mess. It started out okay, but towards the end of practice, it really turned into a mess of flags, sacks, and just not great execution on that side of the football.
It qualified mess, but you kind of just did it there, but like, messes in they're not good enough, messes in their offensive system isn't going to work, or it was just nobody was on the same page?
I think it was just a level of sharpness, like in terms of like attention to detail and focus. And I think that was what a lot of the players talked about after practice, was focus, consistency, like those types of things. They had a really good start to practice where they were picking apart the Packers defense in the first 11-on-11 period. But then when the two teams, they started separate, where like it was just offense, defense on one field and the other field. And then everybody came together for like a game like thing for the last 30 to 45 minutes of practice. So that first separate session was good for the offense yesterday. Then they got on to the quote unquote game field and started going on back and forth. And that's when it got off the rails for the Patriots offense. So you had 3 penalties, a false start, a holding call, and then an offensive pass interference, I think, for what was like an illegal pick down the field on a route combination. You had multiple sacks of Mac Jones. I don't know, 3 or 4 of them. And it just really looked very inconsistent and bumpy. And then you even had the head coach yelling at the quarterback at one point, messing up a situation. So there was a lot of mess. And I think that today could not have been more of a polar opposite. Today, they looked like an offense that could hang 35 points on this Green Bay defense, hitting big plays down the field. Tyquan Thornton, Devontae Parker, seam throw to Hunter Henry, but also really doing a great job in the 2-minute portion of practice, especially the red zone portion. That was really what stood out. Both Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi. I think I tried to calculate it through my notes just now. I think they scored touchdowns, Alex, in the red zone period on 9 of 11 plays. And that's pretty good. Yeah, that is just really you're just really optimistic about it, because this was an offense that was dead last in red zone efficiency last year. We know that. And you watch the first 3 or 4 practices in Foxborough this summer where the defense dominated them in the red zone. And I think every single day we've seen them get a little bit better and a little bit better in the red zone. And then to have a run of the 1s and 2s, basically not having the ball touch the ground for like 10, 12 straight reps, That's the progress that you really hope to see. And that's why I think everybody was so giddy about this practice.
All right, let's talk about Mac Jones, because he had this great practice today. You know, a true where were you when moment. It's right up there with the Giants practice from his rookie year.
Yeah.
And it's a string of what's been really since the pads came on. You mentioned those first few practices were rough, but really since the pads came on, he's been very good. When am I allowed to start getting excited about Mac Jones? And like, hey, because after last year, right, there's all the questions with the 5th-year option coming up. And is he the guy long-term? Can they commit to him? And then there was also that level of, well, what is bouncing back from last year? I think we all pretty much universally agree he was held back last year, but to what extent? Does he need to be as good as he was as a rookie? Does he need to be better? You know, at what point am I allowed to get excited and say, hey, Bill O'Brien might have really unlocked him here? This may have been exactly what he needed.
Okay, so a two-pronged answer. The first one, I think we saw this yesterday, and this was my concern coming off the practice field yesterday, was all the success that I told you about in the early part of that practice was all their early down scheme stuff. It was play action. It was RPO. There was a lot of motion going on and window dressing, and they were able to scheme stuff up. And that's Bill O'Brien, right? That's Bill O'Brien coming in and flexing the muscles and showing his birth of his playbook and all the different tools at his disposal that he can put out there for the offense. When we got into the 2-minute portion of practice where it started to go off the rails, that was just 11 on 11, 3 wide receiver, 1 tight end, 1 running back, roll the ball out, put Mac Jones in the shotgun, and let's see what he can do. And when it got into that portion of practice is when it started to get off the rails. So my concern was, all right, well, we knew this. We knew that if Bill O'Brien could dress it up and put some sauce on it and, put some window dressing on this whole thing, that they would be able to scheme some receivers open, a lot like what they did in 2021, where they just let Mac Jones be a distributor of the football in a functional offensive system, and he held, his own in that sense. But the question that you have is, okay, in that situation that I had described at the end of practice in the 2-minute portion, is he going to be able to carry an offense at that point? Is he going to be able to lead that game-winning drive? Is he going to be able to come back from 10 points down? Like when the adversity hits and the situation is more difficult, is he going to be able to carry them? And I don't know if we necessarily saw that out of him yesterday. But today, he had the great red zone period. He had another good early down period. And then hit the touchdown to Devontae Parker to kind of cap it all off at the end of practice. And that's where it felt like, all right, well, I don't know if I necessarily describe it as him putting the team on the back because it's a practice and it's not really like week 1 against Philadelphia. But it certainly was a great moment and a great throw and catch. So that was progress. But I think the other thing that, you see with Mac is that this offense that Bill O'Brien is putting in is allowing him to really, highlight his strengths as a player, his accuracy, his timing, his rhythm, his anticipation, and then obviously his IQ, his acumen, his ability pre and post snap to process things and process things quickly. Those are his carrying traits. Those 3 things to me: accuracy, timing, and processing speed. And if they just can continue to let him hit those 3 buttons over and over and over again, not weight of the world on his shoulders too often, then I think that he can be a winning quarterback in this league. But I still have reservations about what it would look like if in week 1 against Philadelphia, they get in a hole and they're down 10-0 right off the jump, if he's going to be the guy to bring you back.
All right. Another big story today. Tyquan Thornton gets hurt. We just talked about, all right, when am I allowed to get excited about Mac Jones? Is this the point? We talked about him kind of getting maybe jumped on the depth chart by Demario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte starting to come on strong. Is this a point where you look at it and you say, all right, like his spot's really in jeopardy now? We kind of flirted with that thing about, hey, can Demario Douglas maybe pass him, maybe not? Does that become a real serious conversation now if he, just struggle as he has, and now if he's going to miss time?
Well, I think it's 2 different questions. Is he in jeopardy of losing playing time, or is he in jeopardy of losing a roster spot?
I don't think he's going to lose a roster spot. It would be so rare to cut a guy a year after you took him 50th overall. So
yeah,
unless you think he might, like, that would surprise me. But I think playing time is on the table.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why I wanted to kind of preface that, because roster spot, or I guess I should say, I would more put it as like team control, because like they're not going to come. So the option of maybe him, quote unquote, losing his roster spot would be injured reserve. Like that's the avenue I could see that going if it was that dire. I don't think it is. I think the problem with Taekwon is that he has moments, and today was another moment that he got a deep crossing route from Mac Jones where his speed was a factor, and he was able to get behind the defense and laid out and made a great catch on the pass from Mac that was maybe a little bit overthrown, and he was able to run it down and make a diving catch. As soon as he makes the diving catch, he comes off the field and he's getting looked at by the trainers. And that injury, it just happened right after this great play. And that's what we've seen so much from Taekwon going back to his rookie season. Is, remember his rookie year, he had that good preseason game. I think he caught a touchdown and looked really good in that preseason game. Then it immediately gets hurt in the next preseason game. It's the same thing this year. It's one good practice, and now he's out for 3 practices, or one great catch, and now he's out for the rest of today's practice. If he can't be available, then what are we talking about? Like, it's just not going to happen for him in the NFL. That's bottom line. And I think that there's too much as well. Just there's a lot of technique stuff that he's got to work on. And maybe it's not techniques, not the right word, but just a route running in terms of his ability to convert routes and things like that based off of coverage. That's their offense. Like, that's back to what their offense is doing. They don't want guys, they're not running a whole lot of locked routes. Like, a lot of routes have a lot of conversions at the top route based off the coverage. And too often I see Taekwon running incorrect routes. So the only way he's going to learn how to run better routes is by running more routes. So, like, if he's not available, there's just so many different ways that it's such a factor. I think that Demario Douglas has a real chance of pushing him for playing time in 11 personnel. Like, I think that your speed guy, quote unquote, could end up being Demario Douglas instead of Taekwon. I think that is in play.
And yeah, it's going to look different, obviously, but they need that speed on the field. And I would rather they kind of shift what that role is going to be in order to accommodate Douglas than not have that speed element, because I think they need it, especially now if, you know, we were hoping that maybe Pierre Strong was going to offer some of that. I think maybe that's gone by the wayside here, because it sounds like Ezekiel Elliott repped today finally in team drills, repped heavily. I'm curious what you thought of him, but also, does it feel like now those 2 draft picks last year, Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris, they're kind of getting left behind, and this is what it's going to be. It's going to be Ramondre, and it's going to be Ezekiel Elliott, and that's going to be like the heavy majority of their running game.
Yeah, I think so. And Pierre Strong is in a little bit of a similar as Taekwon at this point, where he gets hurt. He got hurt, I assume, against the Texans in the preseason game, because he hasn't practiced since. So that's the guess there. And now he's missed 4 straight practices, including 2 joint practices. And we know how big the joint practices are to the coaching staff in terms of evaluation. And then you're probably going to miss the preseason game on Saturday night too. And who knows about his availability in Nashville. So you're putting all these things together with Pierre Strong, and it's similar to Taekwon, where it's a moving train. And when you get thrown off the moving train, it's really hard to jump back on the moving train. And I worry for Pierre Strong in that sense, especially because his role is probably going to be a lot in the passing game. And that's a role you have to build chemistry and build reps and get comfortable with, to have them have trust in you to be out there in those situations. So I think you look at that, and then you also look at the fact that Zeke is basically just a more experienced, more what's the word? Decorated version of Kevin Harris. And so it's like, well, why would you be giving those carries Kevin Harris now? Like, you have this guy not only are you paying a little bit, but also is, Zeke Elliott. Like, obviously he's going to play over Kevin Harris. So in terms of Zeke, if you want to go there next, I thought he looked really good, all things considered. Like, we have to put in perspective that everybody else has been in training camp for 16 practices at this point. They all had the spring. They all had training camp to start camp. They've all been in multiple padded practices at this point. And now Zeke is getting thrown into a padded practices in joint practice, which is the most intense practices that you have. So it's a lot. That's a big ask. And the fact that he looked, as good as he did, I think is a really good sign. He ran really hard. I thought he ran with good energy, good power. I thought he was bought in on the sideline and seems invested in being a Patriot as well. We haven't spoken to him yet. Hopefully we'll get him in to see and get to talk to him, or maybe after the game on Saturday night if he plays. But I was pretty optimistic about what I saw from Zeke and encouraged, especially the way that he ran. I thought he ran pretty hard today.
If you're optimistic about it, that's very exciting, because you're very much the guy that would be like, oh, Ezekiel Elliott, he's old, and it's power running. What is this, 1962? And to get all annoyed by that stuff. But if you're excited about it, I'm all on board, because I think it could be really fun. I still like Smash Mouth football. I do. And Ramondre Stevenson and Ezekiel Elliott in your backfield, heads are going to roll. That's going to happen. I'm not saying run the ball 50 times a game, but you're not going to run it 0 times either. And if those are your options, those are two pretty good options.
Yeah, look, this will get mad at me for saying this, but NFL players tell you that things like body blows and, the threat of the running game impacts play action. The math doesn't say it does, but at some point we have to talk to the people that actually play the game and take their word for it. And the Patriots, with Zeke or with Ramondre, if they're a team that can show a productive running game, and then all of a sudden you start sequencing the play action off the running game or the RPO game off the running game, like that's your offense. Like, can be a really productive offense on first and second down, especially. And I don't know. I'm losing track of what I've said on all these shows, to be honest with you. But I think the other thing with Zeke that really stood out, he's a big freaking dude. Like, he's a really big back. He was standing next to Ramondre, and
you're standing next to Ramondre and Kevin Harris, and you think he's the biggest one. You said it on, so we did Catch 22 today on Patriots.com. We did Patriots Beat, and I just heard you on with Matt McCarthy on 98.5 The Sports Hub, and people can find that on the Patriots audio feed, where you can also get this podcast and you should subscribe to. If you want to do the spiel, go ahead. I just think it was funny that I knew exactly where you were going.
No, yeah. I mean, we complete their sentences, I guess, now, because they say that. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah. All right, let's do this then, because I do want to kind of move off some of the stuff we've talked about on the other two shows, but we have to hit all the big notes.
Yeah.
And it's become kind of a daily thing on this podcast anyway. Let's do the bring back down to reality moment. The offensive line.
Yeah, don't say it so grimly. All right, here's
my. That's what it's all of these practices. Like, it's literally, it feels like the offense is building towards something. This is how it's felt all summer.
Yeah,
but it's clearly something good. It's clearly something better than last year. But it's like, we can't quite get there, because you have to throw in all these caveats of, well, a bunch of these throws were probably sacks, or, there were all these holdings and this and that. It's like, I'm waiting for that qualifier to drop. And I know they're going to get healthy. I know they're going to get guys back. I get that. And that's important. And that's why, as I've said, it shouldn't look as bad come week 1, assuming everybody's back, as it does right now. What concerns me is it's a long season. It's a physical position. At some point, these guys that are in now are going to have to play. I don't know how much. Yeah. I don't know how often. I don't know where. But you're crazy if they think they're getting 17 games across the board from the starting 5, whatever that is. Brown, Strange, Andrews, Onwenu, and then whoever's at right tackle. So I guess let's do it this way, Evan. If and when the time comes that somebody gets hurt, who's the guy you're going to be looking from what you've seen from the rookies? And we can throw Cody Russi in there. I know he's been banged up, but Cody Russi, James Ferentz. When the time comes that somebody's banged up and they got to put the 6th guy in,
Yeah.
Who stood out to you? Who do you like as that sixth guy?
Yeah, that's a good question. Right now, I'd probably lean towards Antonio Mafi. I think that
Okay.
he's been the most consistent guy. I think in terms of tools, City So might have him beat, like just in terms of physical tools, and certainly So can obviously play tackle, so that changes things. But if I had to say, like, who is the safest option, and I think when it comes to offensive line play, that's what we're looking for. Like, if you're talking about other positions, you might be talking more about ceiling. But with offensive line play, you really just want the guy that's not going to screw up the most. Like that's the bottom line. And I think Mafi, the way he plays, his body type, the way that his skills translate into what they're going to do. We just talked a lot about the power running game and things like that. He's got that blocky Patriot guard look to him, and he plays like that. If he can just be serviceable at guard, then I think that that's going to be fine for them. Like, I think that's a fine option at this point. I think So is an interesting developmental player. I almost like his long-term outlook better than the short-term outlook. I'd be very, very nervous if he was the starting right tackle in week 1. I think that would be a nerve-wracking situation for Mac Jones and probably for City So, quite frankly, to have Hassan Reddick coming off your edge in week 1 of the NFL season. So I'd be a little bit worried about him in terms of that. I think Riley Reiff is going to have to factor into sometime, whether it's guard, tackle, whatever. Like, he's going to play somewhere, I think, with your starting 5. Ultimately, I wonder if they're working these different combinations and trying So out at tackle and all this type of stuff just to do it in the summertime. And ultimately, we're just going to come back to Brown, Strange, Andrews, Onwenu, Reiff. Like that's what it was on paper coming in. And sometimes they just go back to chalk eventually. And I wonder if that's where we're headed.
All right, fair enough. Let's go over to the defensive side of the ball. I've kind of had this developing take since the spring, and I'm feeling really good about it after today. The breakout star of the Patriots defense, and it's not to say like Kyle Duggar won't be better, or Christian Barmore won't be better, Christian Gonzalez won't be really good, or whatever. Jabril Peppers is going to be a breakout player this year. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people with how good he is this year. And based on the reports today, it sounds like he's taking on a leadership role. I love him as a tone setter. I love the edge he brings, the physicality, and the versatility as well. And it sounds like he's kind of been a big part of their defense in these joint practices. Is that right?
Yeah, he's been good out there and certainly been a tone setter. Love the energy, love the trash talking with Jair Alexander. That was awesome to watch and listen to a little bit. So that was really cool. I like Jabril Peppers' game. He's a physical guy. He plays with his hair on fire, right? Like, he plays with a ton of energy. Yeah. He's one of those guys that's constantly just an energizer bunny when he gets on the field. I think he's going to be a big time factor. And at this point, they're doing a lot of repping with Duggar, Jabril Peppers, and then in that like third safety nickel role, it's either like Jalen Mills or Miles Bryant. That's sort of been a lot of the looks that they've given. And the name I didn't mention there is Adrian Phillips. Right. And I think Adrian Phillips at this point could really be looking at almost being a part-time player in this defense. And maybe Jabril Peppers has overtaken him a little bit in that role that Phillips has played. I love Adrian Phillips, so I don't want to sit here and throw any dirt on Adrian Phillips's name because he's a good Patriot. If I had to pick somebody that would be the wow surprise cut candidate of the summer, I'm leaning a little bit towards Adrian Phillips at this point.
That'd be a big surprise. I wondered if he'd maybe be like a captain candidate because just of his background and his football intelligence.
Like I think in terms of all that, like he's such a great professional and a great Patriot and a great person to have around the locker room, which ultimately probably wins out. But I think at this point, Jabril Peppers is probably a little bit of a better player than he is in a similar body type and in a similar role. And then Jalen Mills, whatever they end up doing with him, I think he's might be a little bit of a better player than Adrian Phillips as well. So
see, I feel like it makes sense to split him and Mills, because like Phillips is probably a better rundown player, probably better for maybe defending some of those bigger, more physical tight ends. And then Mills is your third down player and a guy who covers maybe some of those more tight end wide receiver hybrid kind of guys.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way of putting it. I really like what they're trying to do with Jalen Mills. I think that he can be really, really good in this role that they're trying to work him in, because he's not necessarily good enough to be a full-time outside corner, but he's got quarterback skills in terms of the way that he can cover in man. So if you put him on a tight end, now that tight end doesn't have 4-3 speed, right? Like you don't have to worry about the go routes and the deep posts and things like that, where guys can run away from him on the outside. He's playing that are slower and more, like more matched up in terms of the athleticism with him, but he has like the ball skills and the instincts and stuff like that of a corner. And when you see so many of these tight ends around the league now, I mean, look, the Bills just drafted Dalton Kincaid. You have a tight ends like Kelsey and Mark Andrews and like all these guys. The Packers have Musgrave, who kind of looks like that type of player as well. I think that there's so many of these tight ends that are basically just jumbo receivers, like how we talk about Dickey. And I think Jalen Mills that almost sounds perfect, like in terms of the guys that Jalen Mills could be able to cover.
One more thing on Peppers that I don't know if you saw this today. I think it was Doug Kai tweeted it. Maybe it's Tom Curran, somebody, that he was talking a lot of trash today. Him and Jair Alexander going back and forth. And at one point he kind of got into a little skirmish and it got the whole defense going. And I think this was Curran. I want to see if I can find this now. Like Bill Belichick reacted to it. Hang on. I should have pulled this up a minute ago because I kind of knew I wanted to go here. I wanted to talk about this, but where'd it go? I thought it was Tom Curran who said this. Like they were going back and forth. Here it is. Yeah. Matt goes up top to Devontae Parker for long TD. Reading Tom Curran's tweet here. Jabril Peppers, who has not stopped chirping all day, had so much to say to Jair Alexander. Kept doing it on your head motion to the Packers. Trace of a smile on Bill Belichick's face and a thumbs up. So here you have Jabril Peppers stirring the pot, kind of being a little instigator, being a little nasty, and Belichick's loving it. It's a bit of a reach, but we had Matthew Judon compare Marte Mapu to Dante Hightower and Jamie Collins earlier in this camp. So I'm going to say it. You got a safety, this big physical safety's out here. He's stirring the pot. He's being physical. He's being nasty. And Bill's sitting back kind of loving it because he knows what that means. Haven't we heard a bunch of stories like that about him and Rodney Harrison? And so, like, I'm not saying Jabril Peppers is going to be Rodney Harrison's a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Absolutely is 100% whether he's in or not. He is, he should be. But like, doesn't that kind of sound like that a little bit? Doesn't that kind of sound like the story we'd hear about Bill and Rodney Harrison?
Yeah. So here's the thing, what I took away from that, and I agree with your point, although I hang my in shame that you would compare Rodney Harrison to, I are as big Rodney fans as anybody. Like
I knew you were going to hate that. So I knew you were going to hate that. But and I'm not saying he's going to be the player Rodney was, but like that kind of edge in a leadership role, it does things. Yeah. And I'm just like, doesn't that sound like, all right, let me rephrase this. Isn't that a story you think if Rodney Harrison heard it as a Patriot alumni, he would be proud of?
Yes. And I would also say that today was probably the most excited I've ever seen Bill Belichick in a practice ever. Like he knew, I think, that the Patriots just kicked the Packers' butts. And I think he's loving every second of it, just like all the players were on the sideline and on the field. And I think we get a lot of people that, think that Bill is like this robot that shows no emotions and is like, scoffs at the media. Like, it's like, that's just Bill. Right. And I'm not trying to say that he's like this, like Mr. like persona, like, this great personality necessarily, because I don't know him personally. So I can't speak to that. But I think that today, when Parker caught that touchdown, like he was into it, like he was feeling
say
it.
You know about Bill. Bill loves ball. That's a moment where you just get caught up in the game.
Yeah. And I think that's ultimately for this group. I think in a weird way that's actually important. And I'm not trying to like make too much out of this, but at the same time, this is not the Tom Brady Patriots. This is not the Patriots that are in the Super Bowl every other year and have that confidence and belief in themselves as much as Brady's Patriots did. And I think that this team needs like a little bit of like a pat on the back every once in a while from their head coach. Talking at the quarterback too, right? Like I think that these guys need a little bit of a vote of confidence from the head coach every once in a while. So when Jabril Peppers is celebrating and jawing with Jaire Alexander, Devontae Parker is mossing Rasul Douglas, and everybody, the whole sideline empties to go celebrate with Devontae Parker. It's not the worst thing in the world that Bill gives everybody a thumbs up, like good job, right? Like good job, team. Like that's not a terrible thing to have every once in a while.
I'm going to get raked for that comp, but you see where I'm coming from there, right? And you just kind of completely talked around it because you don't want to address it because it's too much for you. But like, you see where I'm coming from with that one a little bit, right?
I see where you're coming from a little bit.
I think somebody's going to be that guy, we kind of talked about on the last podcast we did. Like we've talked about replacing Devin McCourty, not just on the field and off, but in that leadership role. And if you're a leader, the team kind of takes on the identity of the leader, and it's a different identity. Like with Devin McCourty, very disciplined. I'm not saying Jabril Peppers isn't, but like very disciplined, very methodic, mechanical, stoic. Yeah. And you kind of got that, Dante Hightower, who came in later, kind of was like that. You had the defense, and that was kind of the identity. When you have a guy like Jabril Peppers, when you have a guy like Juwan Bentley, I mean, Keon White's a rookie, but he's another guy that I think is going to embrace this. Mean, nasty, physical, cocky, aggressive, like just that kind of you get a twitch in your eye when you see you got to go line up against him. You're afraid when you're stepping out on the field. These guys are
afraid, Adrian. I'm afraid.
I'm trying to say it in like the nicest way possible, but like these guys are a-holes on the field. Super nice off the field. I love talking to Jabril Peppers, but kind of a-holes on the field. And like if that's going to be their identity, if that's what the post Devin McCourty, post Dante Hightower Patriots defense is, I kind of love that. And Jabril Peppers would sort of be like the perfect guy for that. And it's a little what their defensive identity was. It's different because it's a different era and the rules are different, but there's some overlap to what their defensive identity was when Rodney Harrison was one of those leaders.
Sure. I'll give you that. I think, but I definitely agree with the point that they need some of that nasty, like they need some of that chip, because and look, we're both fan Christian Gonzalez and think that he's going to be a fantastic player for the Patriots. But he's not that guy, right? Like he's a quiet, type of guy. He's a reserve type of guy. He's also young. So like, who knows, maybe in 5, like watching like how Jaire Alexander carries himself, like Christian Gonzalez is the total opposite. Right. And then you also have guys like, Adrian Phillips, who we just talked about as like a guy that could probably be a politician and like make it like as like a senator somewhere. And then you have, certain other guys like that are just a hugger, like just quieter and not necessarily these big rah guys. But I think Jabril Peppers is one of those rah guys. I think Bentley can be one of those guys at times. And I think Keon White's going to be one of those guys if the arrow keeps pointing upward in my head. But of course, I'm blanking on it right now, but I'll think about it in a second. But with Keon White, like you saw that day where he was just like Brad Marchand style, just getting out under everybody's skin, like not doing anything outside the lines, but just like he was, physical, playing hard, through the whistle. And the Packers just like they just like couldn't handle it after a while. And all Keon White did was just play hard. Like he didn't take anything at anybody, do anything wrong. He was just playing his butt off. And I think that's a good thing as well about some of these guys. Like you tone setters, you talk about energy. And I hope that some of these other guys are going to bring it to the table.
I'd say one more too. I gave that list earlier, and it's a guy we talked about. Jalen Mills kind of has that thing too. Like he's not as big, he's not as physically imposing, but that's a guy that's again high energy, high motor, not afraid to play physically. confident guy.
Yeah, I remember the last one. And this one obviously comes with the baggage off the field. But Jack Jones has a little bit of that dog in him too. And
that's a good one.
Yeah, and I think in that cornerback room, I said this on one of the zillion podcasts. They got a bunch of nice guys in that cornerback room, like Christian Gonzalez, Jonathan Jones, Marcus Jones, Miles Bryant. Like those guys are all a bunch of nice guys. Like they are. And I'm not calling them soft or anything like that. I'm just saying like they're not edgy.
Look, like Jack Jones was the only one in that group who like you would expect to hear say something like throwing an out route on me is disrespectful.
Right. And he's got a little bit of that chippiness and that edge. And, you know, after he like an incompletion or a pass breakup, like he walks and talks the talk about it. Right. And I think he's another one of those guys that if he can get his life straightened out off the field, that he's another guy that can bring some of that edge.
All right, talk to me about the other two rookies today, Gonzalez and Mapu. What'd you make of them?
So I thought Gonzalez had a better day today than yesterday. Obviously, yesterday he was a part of the big down throw to Christian Watson. You know, I've talked about that throw a little bit. I felt like he should have gotten depth in zone coverage. He got sucked up a little bit on the underneath route. He probably should have backed off the underneath route and gotten deeper in the deep third and now made it an easier play. Instead, he picked it up late and tried to recover, and it was just too late to the football. I'd also say, you know, for him in that instance, he would try to like make a play on the football instead of just at that point you're at phase, right? Like you're late to it.
Right.
So instead of trying to like you know, run underneath the ball and then turn and look for the football, what they coach them to do is to play the hands. So what he should have done is like when Christian Watson goes up to catch the football, he just runs right through the catch point and tries to knock the ball out once it's in Christian Watson's hands. That allows you to recover from out of phase. When you try to play out of phase, like you're in phase, that's when you start looking for the football and then the ball beats you to the spot. So that was a good coachable moment for Gonzalez, but he made a good pass breakup in 2 minutes today. The Patriots defense stopped Jordan Love in his 2 minute drive, and Christian Gonzalez was right in the middle of it. I still think he's fine in man coverage. He looks great in man. He's smooth. He's really good in press. I think he's going to be great in man coverage. They got to get him a little bit more buttoned up in zone.
All right. Finally, before we wrap this up here, I'm going to make you talk about special teams because I wasn't there. Okay. I didn't see it. So you have to do this.
I know.
Week
one. I had the stopwatch out.
Oh, you did?
I had the stopwatch
out. The times.
And everybody was making fun of me for doing the stopwatch. And I was like, well, Barth isn't here. So like I have to do it because like I can't just steal Barth's hang times and I have to do it myself.
You could have totally done it, but I'm sure that answer went over really well. Week one, who's the kicker? Who's the punter?
I still think it will be the rookies. I know you have your two kicker theory, and I hate it. I roll my eyes at it. I think it's disgusting. I think it smells.
But you think it's disgusting, but you don't think it's unrealistic.
No, I don't think it's unrealistic.
Exactly, and that's the point.
But I think it's terrible. I think it would be a terrible waste of a roster
spot.
spot.
I'm not running the team. I'm not here to tell if people don't care what I would do. I'm not running the team. I'm not the one making the decisions. It doesn't matter what I want to do. I'm here to tell you what I think they're going to do. And I'm saying that they haven't ruled it out yet.
I 100% get that. I just think that it's just a bad idea. I think the rookies will end up winning this out. But your boy Behringer is in a rut. And
ever since Mike Giardi pumped him up.
If this continues, like if this is like he's got the yip situation, then it becomes a real issue. Like then I think Corliss Waitman is almost would maybe win it by default just because of how bad Behringer has been over the last week or so. So hopefully he figures it out. Maybe it's just like a little mechanical thing that whatever the case may be. But I am a little bit worried about the punter. The kicker, not so much. And the reason why I say it's like crazy and stupid and to carry two kickers is because yesterday they did a lot of field goal kicking. Today they didn't do it as much. Folk went 4 for 5 and Ryland went 3 for 5. It's not like we're talking about Ryland like can't like it's like a Justin Rohrwasser situation where he's like can't even hit a 35-yard field goal, right? Like he's right there with Nick Folk already, and he's got the big leg. I just like don't really understand what So we're talking about a kicker that like maybe Nick Folk would miss like 5 kicks throughout the year. Maybe Rylan would miss 7. Right. I'm not really seeing like such a big difference between the accuracy standpoint where I say okay, it would be worth it to carry like a short range kicker and a long range kicker because I think Rylan's pretty close to him in terms of accuracy from what we've seen.
All right. He is Evan Lazar from Patriots.com. I don't even know why they said where you're from. People know at this point. Evan Lazar, Patriots.com, at Easy Lazar on Twitter. Evan, fun talking ball with you all day today. Thanks for coming on this show and enjoy the game.
Thanks.